Her lips met his as if her heart had made the decision long before her mind did. Beneath the glittering crystal lights, Arya Bennett rose on her toes, gripped the lapels of Leon Grant's suit, and pulled him down. A kiss so sudden, so deep, and so real that time itself seemed to shatter. The music cut off, leaving only the sound of their quickened breaths and the flash of white light from dozens of cameras. A few steps behind, Chase Porter, her ex, stood frozen, his champagne glass trembling as foam spilled over the rim. His gaze burned through her, the woman who once begged for his love, now kissing a man the entire city looked up to. Leon's hand rested on her waist, steady, silent. It wasn't possession. It was a statement. "Arya," he murmured, his breath brushing against her lips. "I know," she whispered, her voice trembling. But she knew nothing, except that if she didn't kiss him right then, she would collapse beneath the gaze of the man who had once broken her heart. A few minutes earlier, everything had still been a carefully staged performance. The hotel hosting the charity gala gleamed like a giant jewel by the bay. Glass ceilings scattering chandelier light into 1,000 glittering shards. Polished marble floors stretching all the way to the doors that opened onto a sea breeze balcony. Evening gowns shimmered like mermaid tails, toasts floated as light as foam, and hidden ambitions weighed heavy as lead. The Young Innovators Fund, it sounded like a dream, but everyone knew the truth. This was where people planted money into seeds and harvested power in return. Arya hadn't come here to shine, she just needed not to sink. The silver-blue gown she'd chosen wasn't meant to impress, it was armor, bought with nearly all her savings. She smoothed the fabric, took a steady breath, and smiled politely at the waiter, offering champagne. If she stood in the right place, angled herself just so, she could almost look like she belonged here. Not like the girl who once stayed up all night just to finish fixing a spreadsheet before sunrise. Leon arrived late, the way he always did, as if every room existed only to wait for him. A perfectly tailored navy suit, tie loosened just a little more than usual, hair deliberately tousled. In the office, they called him the man who reads the market before the market reads itself. Here they called him the man who signs the checks. At 40, he had mastered the art of making a room part from on its own. Arya stepped forward to greet him, clinging to the safety of protocol. "I'll remind you of the guest list in table order." "And no need to remind me," Leon said, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Just walk beside me." It sounded polite, but Arya heard something else beneath it. "Don't leave my side." What she didn't know was that, for weeks, the company had been buzzing with rumors. A massive acquisition in the works, and a possible leak inside. What she didn't know, either, was that Leon had chosen her, deliberately, to walk beside him tonight, just to see whose face might betray something at the sight of her next to him. Arya kept herself strictly within the boundaries of colleague escorting a superior. Glass in her left hand, right hand free to jot quick notes on names, occasionally leaning in to whisper a small, crucial detail that made Leon's conversation glide as smooth as silk. She'd learned how to disappear in a crowd by making everything seamless. If she was perfect, no one remembered her. And that was how she won in a place where show-offs usually lost. Until she heard that laugh. That sharp, cocky laugh, with a little curl at the end that made people believe its owner never took anything seriously except himself. Arya's hand tightened around the stem of her glass. She didn't need to turn around. Her body already knew who it was. Chase Porter, the man who once promised to take her everywhere, then left her standing in a doorway, holding an empty suitcase. They'd been together for almost 2.5 years before he took an overseas contract and said, "You don't belong in my world." And now that world was walking in on his arm. Kira Hale, the campaign face of a luxury brand. Skin warm as honey, shoulders glittering under a cutout gown, a triumphant smile clearly practiced in front of a mirror. "Arya?" Chase called, her name rolling off his tongue like it had been waiting there. "It's been forever." Kira gave Arya a once-over, her smile staying fixed while her eyes didn't. "Cute," she said sweetly. "Where do you work? Backstage?" The word backstage dropped like a drop of black oil into a clear glass of wine. Arya swallowed hard. For a moment she saw herself through someone else's eyes. The girl who walked behind the man, held his bag, fixed his collar, whispered in his ear so he could shine. It wasn't fair that her job was always to make something else look brilliant. "You're still here?" Chase went on, trying to sound concerned. "Still doing support work." Arya opened her mouth to say something calm, something polite, but her chest was too tight to hold even a single breath. The breeze from the balcony drifted in, carrying the salt of the sea mixed with expensive perfume. Her fingers felt numb. And then Leon stepped in. Not rushed, not flashy, just with the kind of quiet presence that made every gaze in the room shift toward him. He set his glass down on the nearest table, glanced at the group in front of Arya, as if reviewing a file. "She doesn't stand behind anyone," he said evenly, voice low and steady. "At least not tonight." Chase smirked. "Oh, so that means..." Arya didn't wait for him to finish. Every thread inside her snapped at once. The nights waiting for a phone that never buzzed, the times she was called too practical, the messages he left that were nothing more than a single period. All of it surged into one impulse. She turned to Leon, close enough to see a tiny gleam on his collar, close enough to hear the steady rhythm of his breathing, measured like a metronome used to storms. "Let me borrow this," Arya said, not even sure if the words made it out of her mouth. Then she lifted her arms around his neck and pulled him down. The voices around them faded, muffled like they'd been wrapped in cotton. Lips met lips, hot, soft, dangerous. Leon froze for a heartbeat, then his hand at her waist tightened. Not to push her away, but to keep her standing. Arya closed her eyes, tasting red wine and something both strange and familiar. The feeling of being seen, of standing at the center of something she no longer needed anyone's permission for. When she pulled away, the room exploded in questions. Someone dropped a spoon. A young reporter's camera flashed nonstop. Kira froze mid-smile, unable to hold its perfect curve. Chase nodded slowly, like he'd just caught a story falling right into his hands. "It's done," Arya whispered, not sure who she was talking to. Leon tilted his head, his eyes dark and deep as the ocean after the lights go out. "Are you sure this is the war you want to start?" Arya met his gaze. Reflected in it was herself. Not the backstage girl, but the woman who had just decided how she would be seen. "If I don't start it," she said quietly, "I lose before it even begins." A photographer pushed closer, lifting his camera. "Mr. Grant, Miss Bennett, look this way, please." Arya shifted half a step, and Leon shifted with her, as if they'd rehearsed it 100 times, but they never had. The photo that followed would spread everywhere. The CEO's hand resting lightly on his assistant's waist, the assistant's chin raised, her eyes still burning with something reckless and unnamed. The romantics, the money chasers, the scandal lovers, every one of them would see exactly what they wanted in that frame. At the edge of the dance floor, Chase finally found his voice again. "Confident, aren't you, Arya?" he drawled, sweet as burnt sugar. "Hope you know what you're doing." "For the first time," Arya replied, her voice steady. "I do." A warning flickered in her mind. From this moment on, there was no way back. And yet her chest felt strangely light, as if a long-locked door had just swung open. She glanced briefly at Leon. He didn't smile. He simply looked at her, long enough for her to have no choice but to see herself. Outside on the balcony, waves crashed against the rocks, their rhythm steady as a countdown. Inside, the music resumed, but the night's tempo had changed. The photos just taken would soon leave the camera, fly to news sites, slip into curious minds. Someone would spin their own version of the story. But Arya, for the first time, would be the one holding the pen. And just like that, the masquerade truly began. One kiss, one crowd, one unwavering look. The rest, that could wait for tomorrow. Except tomorrow wasn't a word she planned to use much anymore. Here, now, she had chosen to stand where the light fell. And light, as always, never dimmed just because someone closed their eyes. Last night, Arya couldn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene from the gala over and over. The lights, the flashes, Chase's stunned eyes, and Leon's lips. Every time the memory returned, shame tangled with a trembling she couldn't name. She didn't know if it was guilt or something deeper, far more dangerous. By morning, her phone was in chaos. Messages from coworkers, emails from the PR department, a few unknown numbers she didn't dare answer. She scrolled through social media. The photo, the CEO and his personal assistant's kiss, had already flooded financial news sites, entertainment blogs, even gossip forums. Someone just scored the fastest promotion of the year. When business and pleasure become one. The comments stung like needles pressing into her skin. Arya wanted nothing more than to disappear from the world. She arrived at the office early, hoping to slip in before anyone could look at her. But when the elevator doors opened, curious eyes turned toward her like needles. One employee nudged another, snickering under his breath. "Kiss of the year, huh?" Arya kept her head up and walked quickly to her office. But before she could even sit down, Leon's secretary knocked on the door. "Mr. Grant wants to see you." Now. Leon's office sat on the top floor, its glass walls overlooking the harbor. Morning light bounced off his desk in cold, silver streaks. Arya stopped at the doorway and took a deep breath. Leon was reading a contract, not looking up when she entered. "Sit," he said, his voice low and unreadable. She sat down, fingers tightly interlaced. I'm sorry about last night. Leon set his pen down. "Did you do it because you were angry at him, or because you wanted to test me?" The question froze her. His tone wasn't sharp, more like he was assessing a high-risk deal. "I didn't mean to test anything. I just acted on impulse." He finally looked up. His dark gray eyes, cool and cutting like wet steel, met hers, and every excuse she had evaporated. "Yes, I didn't think." Leon was silent for a moment. The ticking clock filled the space between them. Then he said slowly, I don't like women who are afraid, but I do like the ones who dare to act." The words fell smooth and sharp, like a knife honed to perfection. Arya looked at him, confused. She couldn't tell if she was being scolded or praised. "So, what are you going to do?" she asked. Leon leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced. "If anyone asks," he said evenly, "you'll tell them we're dating." Arya blinked. "I'm sorry." "What?" "Don't worry, this isn't a whim. I have my reasons." He stood and walked toward the glass wall. The light traced the lines of his shoulders, cold, steady, deliberate. "We're about to sign an investment deal with a Middle Eastern fund. They're conservative, to the point that personal image stability is an evaluation metric. A CEO with no scandals and a calm personal life inspires more trust. They need to see me as settled." He turned back, his gaze cutting clean through the air. "And your kiss, unintentionally, just gave me the perfect opportunity to prove that." Arya's mouth opened in disbelief. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? Temporarily. Until the deal closes. You actually think people will buy that?" Leon shrugged. "If the entire financial world can believe a photograph, they can believe a well-acted relationship." She gave a short, uneasy laugh. "Well-acted? You're smart, quick, and you know how to appear just enough," Leon said calmly. "That's exactly the kind of woman I need." He said need the way someone might talk about a promising stock. Arya bit her lip. Part of her wanted to scream. Another part understood. If she refused, the rumors would only keep spreading. If she agreed, at least she controlled the narrative. "How long?" she asked quietly. 3 months, maybe less," Leon replied. "Until the deal is signed. I'll make sure your reputation doesn't take any further damage." He looked at her steadily. "And I need you to learn fast. How to face the cameras, how to walk beside me, how to answer reporters. You're not my assistant anymore, Arya. You're the CEO's girlfriend." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "You're going to teach me how to fake love?" "No," Leon said, eyes never leaving hers. "I'm going to teach you how to make everyone believe it's real." In the days that followed, the strange lessons began. Leon didn't use a whiteboard, only his eyes and his voice. "Walk half a beat slower. When I offer my hand, don't hesitate. Always look at the middle of the other person's chest when you see a camera. Never straight into the lens. Smile, but not too much. Leave people wondering what made you smile." Arya listened and followed, and each time she did, the line between real and pretend blurred a little more. At photo shoots, at business dinners where he instinctively pulled out her chair or brushed a hand against her back in the hallway, everything began to feel too natural. But in every glance Leon gave her, there was something that didn't belong to the plan. A flicker of softness, a moment of hesitation, as if even he wasn't sure who he was pretending to be anymore. One late afternoon, as they rehearsed mock interview answers, Leon looked at her longer than usual. "If you keep looking at me like that," he said quietly, "people will think it's real." Arya answered without thinking, "So will you." No one laughed, no one said another word, only silence, heavy, taut, like a string pulling the two of them closer. That night, Arya went home and unlocked her phone. On social media, a new post had appeared on Chase's account. A photo of him and Kira in golden seaside light, smiles so white they looked fake. The caption was short, sharp as a blade. "Some people need to fake love to feel important." She stared at the screen, her throat tightening. She knew exactly who that line was for. Part of her wanted to throw the phone across the room. Another part, colder, stronger, whispered, "Fine, let's see who's really faking." For the first time in her life, Arya wanted to prove him wrong, not just to him, but to the entire world he once told her she wasn't good enough to belong to. And she would start by making this fake relationship so real that no one would ever dare doubt it. The next morning, when Arya arrived at the office, the lobby was already filled with a photography crew setting up equipment. A large banner read, "Global Finance Review, the leader and the woman beside him." She froze. The woman beside him. The title made her heartbeat stumble. Leon walked up, glanced briefly at the setup and said quietly, "The interview will focus on stability. You just need to be yourself." Be herself. The words stung with irony when everything between them was built on pretense. The shoot took place in the ground floor studio. Bright white lights, a cool gray backdrop, people moving briskly around them. Leon wore a black suit, white shirt open at the collar, exuding just the right amount of power. The stylist had dressed Arya in a simple sapphire blue dress and clipped a silver barrette in her hair. Every time Leon stood close, the air seemed to thin. She couldn't quite breathe right. The photographer, a red-haired woman with sharp eyes, called out cheerfully, "Good, but I need something more intimate, something natural. Maybe you take her hand, or say something that makes her laugh." Leon leaned in, his voice low and steady. "Pretend." He brushed his fingers lightly against her wrist, a move calculated for the camera, but Arya's body didn't get the memo. Her skin burned, her pulse thundered in her chest. When he looked at her, his eyes weren't those of a CEO playing a part. They were too close, too real. She had to turn away just to breathe. The camera shutters clicked in rapid rhythm, echoing like an amplified heartbeat. "Perfect. Hold it, don't move," the photographer called. Arya knew she was trembling, but Leon didn't let go. His hand still circled her wrist, as if he feared that once he released her, they'd both lose the roles they were trying to hold onto. When the shoot finally ended, Arya felt drained, hollowed out. She expected him to nod and walk away as usual. Instead, Leon turned back. "Have dinner with me tonight," he said. "Not for work. Just dinner." She couldn't tell if it was a command or an invitation, but she nodded anyway, because a part of her, the part that had stopped knowing where the act ended, wanted to understand who this man really was when he wasn't pretending. They met at a small restaurant tucked away on a quiet street few people knew about. No reporters, no cameras. Only the distant sound of a piano and candlelight flickering across the wooden table. In that soft glow, Leon looked different, less cold, less polished. He poured wine for her, then suddenly said, 8 years ago, I was going to get married. She left 3 days before the wedding." Arya froze. He rarely spoke about his personal life. "She told me I could love anything," he continued quietly, "except people. Said no one could survive the world of power and publicity I built." He paused, then gave a faint, weary smile. "When you lose the one thing you can't control, you learn to control everything else." The story made Arya see him differently, the silence between his words, the reason he hid every emotion as if it were a weakness. She realized his restraint wasn't pride, it was fear. Fear of losing again. "And if she came back?" Arya asked softly. Leon shook his head. "No one can come back with me. I've gone too far." In that moment, they weren't boss and employee anymore, nor two people pretending to be in love. They spoke like two souls who'd both been hurt, trying to relearn how to trust someone again. Leon's gaze softened. "Thank you for being here," he said quietly. "I'm not good at keeping people close." Arya's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm not good at staying." They both laughed softly, a small, genuine sound, rare and fragile. Then a phone rang, slicing through the warmth. Leon glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted. He answered, listened to a few clipped sentences, and his tone dropped. "I understand. Keep everything contained." He ended the call and set the phone down, his face unreadable. "There's a problem inside the company," he said. "A confidential contract's been leaked to a competitor. Someone sold the information." Arya froze. "Who do you think it was?" Leon didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, long, searching, his eyes suddenly unfamiliar. "They said," he said finally, "the only person with direct access is you." The words cut through the air like a blade. "You believe that?" Arya's voice trembled. "No," Leon said quickly. "I don't, but the board does. They want to suspend you, temporarily, until the investigation's over." Arya shot to her feet. "Suspend me? Leon, I'm trying to keep things under control," he interrupted, his voice low but cold. "If I object, they'll think I'm biased." "Are you afraid of losing the deal?" she demanded, tears glinting in her eyes. "Or of losing your reputation?" Leon said nothing. The silence between them was heavier than any accusation. And in that silence, Arya understood. In his world, even trust had a price tag, and she wasn't worth enough to keep. She left the office that night in the rain. The tower's tall glass walls mirrored her small reflection. Hair soaked, steps unsteady, a woman walking without direction. Her phone buzzed over and over, the screen lighting up with a headline. Personal assistant suspected of confidential leak. Is her relationship with the CEO involved? Each word felt like a heel grinding down on her pride. She didn't know who she was angrier at, Leon, the board, or herself for believing that a single kiss could change her place in this world. On the wet street, Arya looked up at the glowing tower. The building where Leon was probably still in some late-night meeting, composed as ever, as if no one had ever kissed him in front of hundreds of people. A raindrop slid down her cheek, icy cold. This time, no one reached out to steady her. The rain was still falling when Arya moved back into her old apartment. The small room where everything had once begun now felt smaller somehow, as if the dreams that used to breathe within its walls had been smothered. On the table sat a cup of cold coffee and a stack of morning papers, every one with her name on it. Personal assistant suspended amid data leak scandal. From gala kiss to corporate crisis, who is the woman beside Leon Grant? Each headline cut into the same spot, over and over, until it felt like pain. 3 days passed and Arya hadn't left the apartment once. When the doorbell rang at dusk, she thought it was the delivery guy, but the man standing there made her freeze. Chase Porter. His coat was soaked, his smile faint, but his eyes gleamed with calculation. "I heard about what happened to you," he said smoothly, "and I believe you're innocent." Arya hesitated. "You do?" "Of course. I used to love you, remember?" His voice was soft, almost gentle, but his hands stayed buried in his pockets, his gaze empty of empathy. Before she could say a word, Chase stepped inside as if he owned the place. "I've got a few contacts in the media," he said, settling into her chair like it was his. "If you tell me a bit about what's really going on inside Leon Grant's company, say what projects he's actually working on, I could help clear your name. The press just needs a different version of the truth, and I can make them believe you." Arya stared at him, her eyes growing colder by the second. "You want me to betray the man you used me to humiliate?" "I'm just trying to help," he replied, still smiling. "Or are you still loyal to the guy who kicked you out?" Arya stood, her voice firm and sharp. "Leave, Chase. I'd rather be hated than become like you." The door slammed shut. Arya pressed her forehead against the cold wood and took a deep breath. But before she could exhale, her phone started vibrating nonstop. Social media was exploding. Kira had just posted a short video clip, filmed from an angle at that gala night. The image was unmistakable. Arya kissing Leon, crystal clear under the caption, "Fake or real? You decide." Within hours, it had millions of views and thousands of comments tearing the internet into factions. "She's a great actress. He doesn't even look like he wants her. Another cheap PR stunt." The story spread so fast that, just hours later, financial news outlets reported that Grant Holdings' stock had plunged nearly 8%. Arya stared at the screen, her chest tightening. She hadn't just lost her reputation, she dragged him down with her. She knew this wasn't about jealousy. It was Chase. He was striking back at both of them, using her as the spark to burn them down. That night, Arya reopened her old laptop. Before becoming an assistant, she'd studied information technology. The sight of code, of endless debugging nights, came rushing back like muscle memory. She began combing through the company's internal access logs, the ones she'd once had clearance for. And the deeper she dug, the clearer it became. The account that accessed and leaked the confidential files wasn't hers. It belonged to a secondary account, one created using a higher-level admin credential, someone with far more power than she ever had. A name flashed on the login history, Victor Haynes. Leon's personal aide, the man who always acted loyal, who never missed a chance to mock Arya for being the boss's favorite. She remembered his thin, sarcastic smiles, the way he lingered at doorways when Leon praised her work. Piece by piece, it all clicked into place. Victor had been jealous, because Leon trusted her more than him. Arya's hands trembled as she began downloading the evidence. Email logs, server access files, outbound data transfers. Her fingers were shaking but fast, eyes locked on the screen. Every line of code, every timestamp was a lifeline. Proof that could clear her name and save Leon's company. She typed an urgent message and hit send, attaching the files to Leon's private email. But just as the progress bar hit 80%, the screen flickered red. Connection interrupted, and behind her a low voice said, "What are you doing, Arya?" She turned. Victor was standing in the doorway, face dark, eyes sharp with menace. Curiosity, he said, stepping closer, has a way of getting people hurt. You did it, Arya gasped, her breath quick. You leaked the data, and you blamed me. Victor's smirk twisted. And you made it so easy. Everyone already thinks you're the naive one. All I had to do was let them believe it. She tried to run, but Victor grabbed her arm and yanked hard. I'm not gonna hurt you, he said softly, voice almost calm. I just need you to stay quiet until the deal is done. After that, all this will disappear. Arya struggled, but he was stronger. He dragged her down the empty hallway, past the maintenance doors, into the service elevator at the back of the building. She was thrown into the company's storage room, a space that smelled of machine oil and dust. Victor locked the door behind her and gave a cold half-smile. Don't worry, it won't take long. Once I'm finished, no one will even remember you existed. The door slammed shut, sealing her in suffocating silence. Arya pounded on the metal, shouting until her voice cracked, but all she heard was the echo of her own panic. Meanwhile, on the top floor, Leon was in the middle of an emergency board meeting. A tech staffer rushed in, holding a recovered fragment of an unsent email from the company's system. On the screen, only the subject line was fully visible. I found him. The message ended abruptly, cut off mid-sentence, as if the sender had been interrupted. Leon shot to his feet. Where is she? No one answered. He looked around the room, eyes blazing. Stop everything, he ordered. Cancel every meeting. One of the directors protested. Mr. Grant, the stock is... Leon cut him off, voice low but sharp as a blade. There isn't a company on Earth worth more than a human life. He left the building, wind whipping, his coat flapping. Only one thought ran through his mind. If Arya was hurt because of him, then everything he had tried to control meant nothing. And for the first time in 8 years, Leon realized he was truly afraid of losing someone, not because of reputation, but because he loved. Rain poured down as Leon sped out of the city center, shifting gears, his hands gripping the wheel until his knuckles went white. The GPS showed Arya's phone's last signal stopped at an industrial storage yard on the outskirts, where the company used to rent space to store old equipment. He could barely see through the downpour, but his heart guided him clearer than any GPS. The wail of distant sirens grew closer as he dialed, voice rough with tension. She's there, send a team now. The car skidded through a puddle, tires screeching as it stopped in front of the warehouse. The iron doors were locked tight, lights flickering weakly above. Leon jumped out, rain soaking through his shirt, and shouted her name. No answer, only the wind slamming against the metal sheets. He grabbed the handle, braced himself, and yanked with all his strength. The lock snapped. The door flew open with a screech of rusted hinges. Inside, his flashlight sliced through the darkness, and there she was. Arya sat curled in the corner, wrists scraped, hair wet and plastered to her face. When the beam of light found her, she lifted her head, fear flashing in her eyes before it shattered into relief. Leon. He ran to her, tore off the bindings, pulled her up. Are you hurt? No, She trembled, unable to finish. Leon slipped off his jacket and wrapped it around her, pulling her close. It's okay. I've got you. Outside, police sirens wailed as the patrol cars screeched to a stop. An officer rushed in and Leon pointed down the corridor, his voice sharp and steady. Victor Haynes. He's still in the building. The back door burst open. Victor bolted, but a wall of flashing blue light stopped him cold. The glare of police headlights cut across his face, pale and furious. She's lying, he shouted hoarsely. She's trying to frame me. Arya clutched Leon's wrist, her voice weak but steady. No, I have proof. From the pocket of Leon's jacket she pulled out a small flash drive, her hand trembling but sure. This has everything, transaction logs, emails. He sold the information to our competitors. It wasn't me. A police officer took it and immediately handed it to the investigators. Victor thrashed, swearing and shouting, but 2 officers had already pinned his arms, locking the cuffs tight before hauling him away. When he disappeared behind the line of patrol cars, Arya finally exhaled. Her knees gave out, and Leon caught her, pulling her against him. She didn't have the strength to hold herself up anymore. She just leaned into his warmth as if that was the only solid thing left in the world. Outside, the chaos grew. Camera flashes exploded through the rain. Reporters swarmed the scene, microphones raised, voices overlapping. Mr. Grant, is she involved in the leak? One shouted over the noise. Leon didn't answer right away. He looked down at Arya, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear and fragile faith. Then, under the pounding rain and the glare of 100 lenses, he tightened his hold on her and said, clear and unwavering, "The only person I trust is her." His words cut through the chaos, stronger than any official statement. Flashbulbs burst like lightning, reporters shouting over one another, but Leon didn't stop. He turned his back to them and guided Arya into the car, shielding her from the storm of noise and light. In that moment, he wasn't the cold, untouchable CEO. He was just a man who had almost lost the woman he loved. Back at his home, Leon cleaned her wounds with a first aid kit. Warm lamplight fell softly over her scraped wrists. Arya watched him, eyes glistening. "You risked your career to find me," she whispered. Leon looked up, his gaze gentler than she'd ever seen it. "Because if I lost you, nothing else would matter." The words were simple, but the honesty in his voice stole her breath. She let out a shaky laugh. "Do you even realize what you're saying? The media won't stop. The board will." He cut her off, still holding her wrist carefully as he secured the bandage. "Let them talk," he said quietly. "I'm tired, Arya, tired of living the way everyone else expects me to. For the first time, I want to live something real." Silence fell, only the sound of rain tapping against the glass. Arya looked at him and saw, for the first time, no walls of power or control in his eyes, only a man confessing his fear. "I'm not sure I'm strong enough to fight the whole world," she whispered. "Then let me fight it with you," he said, his voice low, rough. But this time, no contracts, no titles. Her gaze dropped to his hand still resting on her wrist. "If I say yes, are you sure you won't regret it?" Leon smiled, a rare, unguarded smile so real it made her chest tighten. "No," he murmured, "but with you at least I'll know I'm alive." In that instant she stopped thinking. She leaned in and kissed him. This time there were no flashing lights, no crowd, no stage, only breath, warmth, skin, and the quiet relief of not pretending anymore. Leon's arms slipped around her back, holding her gently, as if he feared the dream would vanish if he let go. Then Leon rested his forehead against hers and whispered, "Let's start over. No company, no roles, just us." Arya nodded softly, eyes glimmering. "I'll say yes, but we both know the world won't leave us alone." Leon's voice dropped to a quiet certainty. "Then let them talk. We'll just hold on to what's real." Outside the window, the rain kept falling, but inside that room, a small flame of truth had been lit. It wasn't the loud, flawless kind of love people wrote headlines about. It was the kind that rose from the wreckage, raw, quiet, and finally real. A month later, the shimmering lights of the Entrepreneur of the Year Gala reflected off the Crystal Hall, where the city's most powerful gathered. Arya stood beside Leon, wearing a simple ivory dress. No longer the dazzling silver armor from that first night. She had learned that real strength didn't come from how she looked, but from standing tall when the world doubted her. Still, she could feel the weight of countless gazes, curious, skeptical, even scornful, all fixed on her. From the press table came a wave of whispers. "She's still hanging on to him, huh? Knows how to use an opportunity, doesn't she?" Arya stayed silent, eyes fixed on the stage where the host was introducing Leon Grant, the man who weathered a media storm and kept Grant Holdings at the top. Applause filled the hall, loud and polished, but Arya could feel the edge behind it, every clap carrying its own quiet judgment. Leon stepped onto the stage, the spotlight tracing the calm, composed lines of his face. He looked every bit the man the world wanted him to be. Confident, unshaken. Then the host, half teasing, half serious, said into the mic, "Mr. Grant, after all the romantic rumors that once shook the financial world, is there anything you'd like to say to the public tonight?" The room went still. Arya's heartbeat stuttered. Part of her feared he'd do what men in his position always did. Smile, deflect, move on. But Leon didn't. He turned, his gaze sweeping the audience until it found her. And when their eyes met, time seemed to stop. A slow smile curved his lips. Then, to the shock of every camera in the room, he stepped down from the podium and walked straight toward her, through the storm of flashing lights. Leon took her hand, warm, steady, sure. "I'll say this once." His voice rang through the hall, calm but unwavering. "She didn't destroy my reputation, she saved it." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, the frantic strobe of camera flashes, chaos wrapped in applause. But Leon didn't falter. He turned toward Arya, eyes locked on hers, the kind of look that left no room for doubt. Then he leaned in and kissed her, under the glare of every light in the room. It wasn't a reckless kiss, nor a defense. It was a declaration that they no longer needed to hide or pretend or play for anyone's approval. The applause swelled. Some people rose to their feet, others stayed frozen in stunned silence. But for Arya, the noise faded into nothing. There was only the warmth of his lips, the pulse of his heartbeat against hers, and a peace she had never known until now. On the giant screen, the image of their kiss played live for the world to see. In a distant apartment, Chase watched in silence, face blank, unreadable. He switched off the TV, tossed the remote onto the couch, and walked out without a word. He knew then, there was no place left for him in this story. Elsewhere, the truth about Kira unraveled. It came out that she'd hired someone to edit and splice the fake or real clips she'd posted. Contracts were pulled, brands cut ties, her agent issued a cold statement, partnership terminated indefinitely. Everything she had tried to destroy came crashing down on her instead. When the night was over, Arya and Leon slipped quietly out of the hall. Neither spoke. In the car, the city light slid past the window, gold streaks flickering across her face. She looked out and said softly, "You know, the first time I kissed you, it was just for revenge." Leon kept his eyes on the road, the faintest smile curving his lips. "And this last one?" he asked. "Who was that for?" She turned to him, eyes glowing beneath the dim city lights. "For the man I chose." The car turned onto the boulevard and a gentle jazz melody rose from the radio, weaving through the quiet air. Outside, the reflections on the wet pavement shimmered like fragments of old memories, washed clean at last. No more revenge. No more pretending. Only two people who had walked through ruin to find something real. And as the scene faded, leaving only the soft hum of saxophone and the distant sound of rain, their story closed, not with tragedy, but with the quiet triumph of two souls who had lost everything and dared to love for real. Their love didn't begin the right way, but it ended at the right moment, when both finally dared to be honest with their hearts. Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't conquering the world, but taking one step closer to the person you love, before it's too late. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If you believe that true love is always worth chasing, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell to join me for the next stories to come.